The Fed in focus as traders prepare to hang on every word. In today's cover story, behind the currency crumble in Russia. Plus, are those low gas prices slowing down the momentum of electric car sales? And is America the new wine country? First Business starts now.
You're watching First Business. Financial news, analysis, and today's investment ideas.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Angela Miles. It's Wednesday, December 17th. In our first look, strap yourselves in. It could be a bumpy ride ahead. The VIX, a forecast of anxiety in the stock market, spiked 15% in trading ahead of today's Fed meeting. Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen will field questions from reporters following that meeting. Investors are questioning the market. The blue chips fell 112 points, the Nasdaq 57 and the S&P 17 yesterday. Gold dropped $11 and oil rose by a dime. Among today's potential market movers, GE lowered its profit outlook for next year as the plummet in oil prices weighs on its oil and gas businesses. American Apparel has fired CEO Dob Charney for good. Shares soared more than 10% after the close, and SeaWorld is postponing its quarterly dividend. Larry Shover of SFG Alternatives is joining us now. And Larry, the market has a bunch of Fed fanatics out there. People are very concerned about what the Fed will say today.
You know, they are, and they probably should be, but I do think it's going to be tempered with a lot of well-crafted speech. If they get rid of considerable time, it's going to be replaced with the fact that the Fed's going to remain very data-dependent going forward.
Is the crude collapse about to come to a close?
You know, great question, and I'm going to say yes, because I think right now it's completely oversold. People are selling with reckless abandon. Everyone I speak to is bearish. Typically, consensus is wrong.
As you know, Moscow is moving the market. Do we worry now about U.S. companies that have exposure to Russia, or is it too late?
You know, I think it may be too late. You have a country dealing with sanctions, oil price, high interest rates, a falling currency. It may be too late. However, on the other side, it might be a good time to start value buying because, hey, most of the stock market's been absolutely crushed over the last 6 months.
Just a couple of stock names you would buy.
Well, some of the oil services that have exposure to Russia, in particular Schlumberger, Oxy Petroleum. I like both of those companies.
Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome.
Chuck Coppola steps in now with more on how Russia is rattling the market.
In our cover story, kaput, by definition, broken and useless. That may also describe Russia's currency, the ruble, after Russian President Vladimir Putin boxed his country into an economic corner that's getting smaller with every drop in the price of oil, Russia's chief export. And now a White House spokesman says President Obama will authorize more sanctions against Russia and military assistance to Ukraine. The ruble is in free fall and gaining speed, dropping 50% for the year against the dollar, 22% of that in the last month, 11% of it since Monday.
The Russians have basically made this bed for themselves. One thing they weren't counting on was oil tanking. So this combination of sanctions against them and then at the same time oil tanking has caused massive turmoil at their central bank.
It led Russia's central bank to raise interest rates to 17%, an emergency attempt to stop the ruble from falling further.
I think worst case scenario, you can see a run on the Russian bank. If we don't see oil prices stabilize pretty soon, I think the problems in Russia are going to get a lot worse. And I think it's going to impact not only Russia, but some of their trading partners like Germany and the rest of the region.
The economic vice applied to Russia is tightening. This week, President Obama is expected to authorize more sanctions against Russia, its state arms exporter, barring investment in Gazprom, Russia's energy giant, and restricting international companies from technology transfers to Russia.
A lot of their companies have no access to foreign capital because of U.S. sanctions. So what the central bank is trying to do is keep the currency propped up in order to stop a flight of capital.
The president's signature also authorizes $350 million in military assistance to Ukraine. It all coincides with OPEC's strategy to flood the market with cheap oil to discourage U.S. producers. But it's hurt Russia more than oil producers here.
I think they get it over there at OPEC, but at the end of the day, how long are they going to bleed out? At the same time, they're trying to cause impact to the U.S. How long are they willing to force most of the member countries into the red, having to draw down on their own foreign currency reserves. Even in Saudi, they're beneath break even now.
Oil's impact on the bond market reached to Alaska late Tuesday. Moody's Investors Service cut the state of Alaska's outlook from stable to negative, saying oil's plunge now threatens to cut the state's budgetary reserves.
Back in the U.S., Apple is claiming a huge victory in court. The tech company was being sued by 8 million customers. They were seeking $350 million in damages, all because Apple changed its iTunes music service so iPods would not operate with other companies' products. They lost their argument. The jury decided that Apple's 7.0 version of iTunes was a genuine upgrade and did not violate antitrust laws. Apple investors took a minute to register the win. Shares had a 4-point up and down swing before finally closing out at $106. The case famously included testimony from Apple's late CEO, Steve Jobs.
The Pennsylvania Supreme Court tells Walmart that it was out of order with its employees. The court largely upheld a class action case against the retail giant and agreed that it denied full rest and meal breaks for employees and failed to pay employees for hours that they worked. Walmart says it's considering appealing the ruling to the U.S. Supreme Court. It also estimates costs from the trial will be about 6 cents per share in the fourth quarter of its 2015 fiscal year.
The government is dropping an insider trading case connected to Herbalife. The Securities and Exchange Commission is dismissing civil charges against a man accused of profiting off of insider information of the supplements company. The SEC dismissed the charges because the men who gave the trader the information allegedly were not available to testify.
CVS Caremark and its investors are reaping the benefits of more Americans having health insurance. The chain says it'll buy back $10 billion worth of stock. It also wants to raise quarterly dividends by 27% to 35 cents per share. The share buyback will happen over the course of several years. CVS Caremark is the nation's biggest seller of prescription drugs. Its stock rose $2 yesterday.
Investors are sticking to the Post-it notes and Scotch tape company. 3M shares jumped $2 on word the iconic American company is on track to reach its long-term financial goals. Earnings could grow up to 12% next year. 3M is also raising its dividend by 20 cents in January.
There seems to be no end in sight for falling gas prices, and that has Americans hitting the road. AAA predicts a record 99 million people will travel more than 50 miles by car or air this Christmas Day, up 4% from a year ago. AAA also predicts prices at the pump to drop between 10 and 20 cents by Christmas. The national average for a gallon of unleaded is now $2.52, down from $3.22 a year ago.
Cars and SUVs that guzzle gas are in demand as prices plunge at the pump. According to the National Association of Convenience Stores, it's possible lower gas prices are cutting into sales of fuel-efficient cars and trucks.
We have seen in the past when prices go down, people seem to abandon their efforts to conserve fuel and go back to their old traits of driving bigger cars, driving a little further than they might otherwise do if they were trying to watch their money. A recent survey we just did indicates that consumers are still looking at prices, but they are much more optimistic that the lower prices we've been experiencing will continue, and it seems to be translating into a little bit happier consumer base and a little bit more free spending for them.
Shares of electric car company Tesla have been sliding right along with those gas prices. Tesla closed below $200 yesterday.
Another of Bernie Madoff's underlings is headed to prison. Former manager Joanne Kruppe was sentenced to 6 years. She was the last of 5 former Madoff employees to be sentenced after they were found guilty in March. At the sentencing, Judge Laura Swain said of Kruppe that she was compliant with everything and questioned little.
On Capitol Hill, lawmakers are cracking down on Wall Street banks using insider information to trade commodities. Democratic Senator Carl Levin introduced the bill, and Republican John McCain co-sponsored the measure. It's the first legislation that limits Wall Street's ability to buy and sell physical markets of crude, aluminum, and other commodities. In the past, Senator Levin has accused Goldman Sachs and other banks of manipulating the metals market.
Employees at Southwest Airlines are carrying extra baggage this week. Members of the Transport Workers Union picketed outside 16 airports across the nation yesterday. They say that the company is no longer the most punctual airline and that leadership has devalued both customers and employees. Workers are also upset about ongoing contract negotiations. Southwest tells First Business Informational picketing is a common practice during negotiations and will not impact our operations.
A name change is happening at Chrysler. The car company is officially adopting the moniker FCA US, which stands for Fiat Chrysler Automobiles. The new name was first given exposure on Wall Street when shares listed in October on the New York Stock Exchange.
Last-minute holiday shoppers get a respite as Amazon extends its free Christmas shipping deadline. Customers can purchase items up until this Friday, December 19th at 11:59 p.m. and still be able to get them delivered free by Christmas Eve. The new deadline is a 2-day extension over last year's December 17th cutoff. Amazon says it expects this Thursday, the 18th, to be its busiest shipping day of the year.
On to the economic calendar for today. It's the MBA Mortgage Index, CPI for November, current account balance, crude inventories, and the FOMC rate decision. On the earnings calendar, it's Herman Miller, Oracle, FedEx, and General Mills. Still to come, the big name sponsor that is no longer a star on American Idol. Plus, why Americans are so fine with wine. And McDonald's has a serious hot potato problem on its hands. That's right after the break.
Finally, some good news for Darden Restaurant Group. Quarterly earnings and revenue both beat, albeit slightly, analysts' expectations. The company has seen its share price jump more than 15% since activist investors Starboard took control of its board in October. Shares of Darden fell 2% yesterday, closing at $55.91.
Americans have more money to spend on Olive Garden pasta as gas prices fall. They are also spending more on wine. Whether it's red or white, wine sales are hitting new notes in the U.S. Jackie Keenan reports from Florida.
Eat, drink, and be merry. That's what many of us are doing this holiday season, and the evidence is in wine sales. With 40% of annual wine sales happening during the holidays, 2014 is expected to be another record year. Last year, Americans gulped more than $36 billion worth of wine, and it was the third year in a row the U.S. consumed more than France. The spike in sales is a sign Americans are seeing the glass as half full when it comes to the economy. And the trickle-down effects can be seen at Kevin Pelly's wine shop, where sales continue to increase every year.
Today, more and more people are drinking wine, not just the affluent, and are willing to experiment with new regions.
Countries all over the world are making and marketing wine, which makes prices affordable for everyone and is making the U.S. a country full of winos.
Americans who are so hungry for knowledge do research and find out what the grapes are, what the best vintages are, whereas in the old world, it's just part of the table.
That is really, really good. You should have some.
Sharon Stewart has spent her entire career in the restaurant industry. She capitalized on the wine trend 2 years ago when she opened her wine bar, Wine Bistro. She operated a martini bar in the 90s and says wine became the drink of choice sometime in the last decade.
I think everything in the restaurant industry, whether it's a restaurant or a bar, has a life cycle. I think this time we may have hit the market just right.
And here at the Wine Bistro, there's one gender in particular that comes in for their vino.
Yeah, we need more guys in here.
Stewart says 75% of her customers are women coming in for girls' nights filled with gossip and Pinot. But they're also mainly from one generation.
And the majority of the population is my age. We're the baby boomers. Most of my friends even have switched over from drinking martinis to drinking wine.
For First Business News, I'm Jackie Keenan.
The internet is also behind the spike in wine sales. Sites such as wine.com and tastingroom.com are becoming popular ways for consumers to buy and try new bottles of wine.
Do you want fries with that? Might stop being asked in Japan thanks to labor disputes here in the U.S. West Coast port slowdowns in the middle of a labor dispute between dock workers and management means Japan's not getting timely shipments of frozen McDonald's French fries. As a result, more than 3,000 of the outlets in Japan are serving only small portions of fries through at least the new year.
Coming up, why a relationship is fizzling out between Coke and American Idol, plus what corporate America is doing right in keeping employees happy. No more more quotas for one cola. Coca-Cola will no longer serve as the top sponsor of American Idol. For the past decade, Coke's product placement has been a scene stealer at the judges' table of the singing competition. But now Coke is parting ways with the show, saying only it wants to venture into new spaces to connect with teens. Idol's ratings have dropped dramatically through the years. Coke spent about $16 million in ads on Idol this year compared to $49 million in 2012. Chuck Coppola is back with tips on bringing harmony to the office.
Confident enough to quit and find something better. That's where a lot of us are in this recovery. So, what are we looking for? Dr. Ron Friedman, a workplace psychologist who's just written the book, The Best Place to Work, says, well, besides better pay, we want more windows. How can that help?
Yeah, the window. So that's really fascinating. It's one of the more surprising things I found looking at the research for The Best Place to Work is that daylight is healthy for us. And so when we sit near a window, our body produces more serotonin. That puts us in a better mood. It produces more melatonin, so we're able to sleep at night, and it lowers our blood pressure. And so there are studies showing that you can actually predict the level of satisfaction in the workplace by the amount of sunlight entering the workspace.
In your book, you suggest ways companies can keep people from feeling as though they're repeating the same thing daily.
Well, the book talks about plenty of things that people can do, and, it really comes down to the three basic psychological needs. So the one is the feeling of growing your competence. And one really simple, inexpensive thing that any company can do to keep people feeling like they're learning and expanding their skills is to provide a reading budget. And so what that would look like is essentially providing people with the option of buying a book that's relevant to their work once a month or once a quarter, and then you can create an office library where people are exchanging new ideas and improving constantly. It's not an expensive thing to do.
And apparently, if there's one thing to get rid of, it's that Employee of the Month award. Why?
It's interesting. It's a well-intentioned idea, the idea of recognizing employees for producing great work. But what it does is it pits employees against one another. And so now I'm less likely to recognize you because I'm afraid I'm not going to win the award. You'll win the award. And so if you've got a company of 100 employees, you end up having 99 losers who walk away feeling like this month's efforts weren't recognized, and one person who ends up feeling good. So a better approach is to create a culture where everyone feels confident enough that they can recognize one another, and recognition doesn't just come from the top, it comes from other employees.
You also list companies such as Google and Facebook who encourage risk-taking. Now, wouldn't you want your employees to follow the course that you've charted?
Well, not if you want people to deliver terrific work. The way that it works is that if we are feeling fearful about taking risks, we're not learning at our best, we're not innovating at our best, and so there's a reason for why some of these companies are rewarding failure. It's because they get people to take risks and invest in producing better work.
Dr. Friedman, author of The Best Place to Work, thanks very much.
My pleasure.
One executive is learning a harsh lesson about going nuts. South Korean Air could face a $1.3 million fine after an executive threw a fit over being served macadamia nuts in a bag instead of a plate. It delayed a flight out of New York. That executive happens to be the daughter of the CEO of Korean Air. They have both apologized. Still ahead, Trader's Dish on Darden and why Olive Garden is suddenly a tasty choice on investors' menus. Chart Talk is next. Deming of Equity Armor Investments is here now. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Angie.
Investors have a big appetite for Olive Garden. Darden stock has made a delicious 15% move since mid-October, started to rise again in the after-hour session last night. Would you be a buyer or a player of this stock at all?
I think right here, Angie, I think you could be a cautious buyer. I'd probably look to play it by buying call spreads as opposed to buying the stock outright because of just the way the market is acting overall right now as we end the year. But ultimately, if you look at those numbers that came out yesterday and then you see how the stock's reacting, just a shade off its closing high, which is 58.5 around there. So you see a pop above 58, you certainly I could see it going to 60 or above. So I think I'd be looking to maybe buy some call spreads here in that 55, 57.5 level.
We hope that's a nice call on your part as well. Let's move over to FedEx. This stock has been strong, Dan.
It has, yeah. You know, we're seeing a little bit of weakness here, like last couple of days, just kind of following the market as well. But some of the trends in place for FedEx, you know, are pretty positive, particularly as, you know, we see oil coming down dramatically. That's certainly going to be a boost, I think, for them moving forward. We'll have to see, you know, they kind of initiate they basically kind of have a little bit of this holiday season built into this earnings announcement, so we'll have to see how that plays out as well. But right now, you know, you're looking at a pretty positive trend. It's around 174-ish right now, I believe. So I think, you know, right here you could pick it up and also play for the up move here moving into the first quarter of next year.
What would be your target on FedEx?
I think right now, if you're looking at FedEx, you could see it pop up to that 180, 185 level because, you know, we have seen a little weakness here. Like I said, you know, you've got a 50-day moving average at 168. So somewhere in this lower 170 level, I think you could see it pop to 180, 185.
Dan Deming, bullish on pasta and the delivery business for us this morning. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Angie.
That's a wrap for today. Coming up tomorrow, big happenings at the box office. Controversy over a new film from Sony. Plus, Little Orphan Annie makes an attempt to topple The Hobbit. From all of us at First Business, thanks for watching our show.